Hi, everyone. Is everyone having a good day so far? Good? Energized? Awesome. So this is the Strategies for Engagement session, 2301. So if you're in the wrong place, it's your time to leave. If not, you can continue to stay here. I will be introducing our panelists, Emily, Laura, and Amy. Emily will be going first, and they'll be going in that order. So Emily Murray has been the archives coordinator of the Florida Gulf Coast University Archives and Special Collections for the last 4 years. She got her undergraduate degree in anthropology from Florida Gulf Coast University and is currently pursuing her master's in library and information science at Florida State University. Laura Lethers is a digital production librarian at NC State University Libraries. She manages the day-to-day production and workflows for the expanding cooperative extension history grant-funded projects. And before working on the project, she worked in collections management for both archives and museums. She has an MA in public history from NC State University and an MSLS from UNC Chapel Hill. Amy Archambault, that's it, right? Yeah. Spent most of her career working to design and develop inclusive online courses and programs in higher ed. In 2024, she decided to make a career change to archives and has been enjoying learning more about the profession through internships, volunteer work, and involvement in various professional organizations. Amy completed her MSLIS at UNCG in 2013, but returned last year to take several courses in archives, rare books, and digital libraries. She is currently on a 12-month contract position with Western Carolina University as their university history archival technician. I'm sorry, y'all. Seeking out historical treasures and conducting an inventory of objects, records, and other artifacts to one day be used by researchers and historians. We will have 15 minutes for each speaker and then 15 minutes for Q&A at the end. So please write your questions down so that they'll be able to answer them. And I'm going to have Emily come up.
Where's that? Oh, the screen. Perfect.
Okay. I'll try to remember it.
Okay. Hi, everyone. How are y'all doing? Let me get set up a little. So as mentioned, I'm from Florida Gulf Coast University. So thanks for letting me crash the North Carolina conference. Happy to be here and happy to be out of Florida just for a little bit. So to get started, I'm just going to find where my clicker is. Maybe. That works. All right, so Florida Gulf Coast University, just to give you an introduction, is the 10th public state university in Florida, and it was approved by state legislature in 1991, and we didn't actually open until 1997, meaning that we are a young institution, only 28 years old, but we are tiny and mighty. We are known for our environmental impact to Southwest Florida and our academic excellence, and we have about 16,000 students currently enrolled, 60% being undergraduate students. And this is where I get to work every day. It's our Wilson G. Bradshaw Library, named after one of our university presidents. And the University Archives and Special Collections is on the 3rd floor. And then to give you some more history about the archives, as I mentioned, 1991, FGCU opened. 1997, we officially had our first set of classes. But the archives wasn't actually established and built until 2012. Prior to that, our library was only the 1st floor, and then we slowly started building. My former director, Melissa Mines Vanderbert, established the archives, hired our first student workers, created exhibitions, and maintained collections starting in 2012. And then in 2020, we got our own social media account that was separate from the library, which I'll talk about in a little bit. And then in 2022, I came around and my position took over social media, and I was required to create a new social media strategy for our new generation. So as I mentioned, we were attached to the library social media account. They started their social media in 2016. We were featured quite a bit, but not frequently. It was usually maybe once a month if requested. And if we were submitting photos to the social media manager. But in 2019, we started working on one of our largest exhibitions to that point, which featured international travels and years of research, which opened in January of 2020. As you can guess, that didn't go well. It actually closed a few weeks later, but all of the excitement leading up to that exhibition and then its shift to a digital exhibition made us realize that maybe we should have our own social media. So I was tasked with creating a social media. In the beginning, as I said, we got it in 2020. I came on and made a new policy in 2022 because what we were doing before just wasn't really working. They kind of they adopted the library's way of doing so, and they were asking for feedback, but it was one person running it. And I am a very, very collaborative person. I like working with multiple people. So I kind of wanted to change that way of looking, and instead started by asking 5 of the basic questions, which is why? Why should we have a social media? Why should it be separate from the library? Our justification was that it advances our mission statement by advancing research, by acquiring, preserving, and providing public access to original primary source materials. I like to remind people that getting social media and even maintaining social media is kind of like getting a pet. It's really fun because you get to pick the name, you get to build your profile, you get to decide what it does, how it goes. But then you have to remember that it requires regular attention, feeding, training, all the other things that you don't really think of. Once you have identified if you want a social media or if you should have a social media, then you need to decide where. Where are you posting? What are your platform or platforms? Of course, depending on your archive, I'm an academic archive, so I have to follow university marketing and communications policies. You may have to follow other institutional policies, while also making sure that you're following the rules of the specific platform. So as we've heard, Instagram and things like that have changed their rules within the last couple of years. What's most important, I think, when you're identifying your platform is that you're identifying your target audience. What is your audience going to be using, and how are you going to be reaching them? And then, of course, when are you going to be posting? Depending on your platform, you'll research the algorithm and decide what's best. The FGCU archive specifically uses Facebook and Instagram, so I've done some research, and what I have seen most common is between 11 to 3, we're posting, and then we're posting Monday, Wednesday, Fridays. Deciding on a social media strategy where you're posting on the same days and creating that schedule helps maximize visibility, engagement, and impact, while it also helps build audience engagement and trust. So they know where to keep coming back to and when to come back to. And then who. When we think of who, we might think of who's posting, but I want to go even further and say who will be managing and who is your target audience. So again, for us at an academic institution, it's more specific to students, alumni, staff, and faculty, but you may need to reach a different audience based on your archive and based on your collection. FGCU does something special, I think, where we shift responsibility away from me and the marketing coordinators, and we shift it to archival staff and students. So while I do work in the archives and I am an archivist, this is one of my responsibilities, and I wanted that collaboration between all of us. So staff, faculty, and students who work in the archive are responsible for posting on a specific week, where they post Monday and Friday, and student interns get to highlight their work on Wednesdays. And then, of course, everyone's favorite part of social media is what are you posting? What makes your archive special? And again, just to follow institutional policies and think about restrictions between your collections and your materials. I won't touch on some of those for FGCU, but if you have questions about what I mean by restrictions and policies, I'm happy to answer that at the end. So some content ideas and things that do really well are, of course, behind the scenes and posting about research. And of course, because we have student involvement, they post trends quite often. And usually students think that they're going to struggle with this, but they actually have a lot of fun with it because most of our students, if not all of them, are already on social media. So they're posting what they're seeing on their personal feeds. And then the Archives Backlog is a series that I started like 2 years ago, where we interview students, staff, faculty, and interns about how they got into archives, what their favorite collections are, kind of just like behind the scenes of them working in the archive. And then, of course, it can't be archives without posting about your materials and your collections and what makes your archive special. And then again, some throwbacks. Since we are an academic institution, we post a lot of FGCU alumni, FGCU departments. And then this event, which I always love to highlight, it's this specific one is Pi Day, the Great Library Bake Off, which was started by Virginia Tech. And it happens every year on March 14th. This is actually the 7th year that it's taken place, where archives and libraries across the US dish out historical pie recipes from their collections and then turn around and go online to share if they succeeded, if they failed, what was weird, what happened. And for those of you maybe wondering, those pies were delicious. And then, of course, we also do exhibitions. So we just post about behind the scenes of exhibitions, exhibition posters, receptions, events, etc. And then hopefully some of you are asking how, especially when you're creating a social media strategy. Like I said, those 5 W questions are really important, but also how? How do we know it's working? How do we know it's doing well? How do we measure impact? And there's a few different ways that I measure impact. So for quantitative metrics, we can look at followers by year or by month. And not only does tracking it in a way like this, I'm a Virgo, so I have to color code everything. So it might not always look like this, but this helps me not only track our growth as a platform, but it also helps me identify correlations between posts that do really well, correlations between like what students and our staff are posting. And I always love having to explain those like weird big jumps and be like, what was that again? So it's always fun. And then this is just an example of audience demographics. I pulled this from April. And it helps you not only identify if you're reaching your target audience. So like I said, ours are students and alumni, which helps me know that those 18 to 24 may be those undergraduate students that are enrolling, while also could be the 25 to 34. And not only does it help you know if you're reaching your target, but it helps you identify gaps so that you're posting more relevant content to those gaps. And then I always like to do top 5. I've heard you can do top 5, top 10, top 20, however you would like. This just helps me identify what did well and what maybe not so well. This is, again, just an example of the 24-25 academic year. So we see what is doing well. For qualitative feedback, for qualitative metrics, I look at feedback. Whether it's from our students and our staff or whether it's from our followers, you can collect feedback in a few different ways, whether it's surveys, direct messages, in the actual comments, like the Gaylord one, which I have framed on my desk because I think it's so funny. Emails, interviews, instruction tours, just anyone mentioning to you like, oh, I follow your social media. Oh, I saw this the other day. I try and keep track of those so that I know that I'm reaching people when I'm posting. And then my favorite part about posting on social media, when they asked me to create a social media strategy in 2022, I said, you guys are crazy. I know I look young, so I look like I have my own social media. I barely post. I didn't know anything about anything, and I am in no way an expert. But my favorite part about social media that I've learned to love is identifying relationships and finding supporters that you didn't think were out there. because sometimes it seems like you're posting into a void, but we get wonderful relationships like this one. So this is a story about a digital collection that one of our students was working on, and she ended up finding these digital born photos that were undated, unidentified, and she came to me and said, oh, I would love to post about these. Maybe we can find out if alumni knows who these people are or what event this was. She also did say vintage alumni photos to me. You'll understand in 2 seconds. But these we found out are from 2013, so that was a slap in the face. But so what she did with these 3 photos, and there were a few others, but these ones specifically, was she decided to post these on social media. So she created her own caption. She collaborated with FGCU alumni, which you can kind of see on the top. It's kind of hidden behind the online people at home. While also tagging our student section, which is called Dirty Birds. They like named themselves, so they get decked out at like every basketball game, every volleyball game. Tagged all of them. Made sure to even do hashtags like FGCU Archives, Throwback Thursday, et cetera, and an alumni saw someone that she knew. And I don't know if any of you get the irony of this, but I didn't know which helmet guy she was talking about. Luckily, I actually ran into her the day after she commented that and started talking with her about, that's great. Like, I'm so happy that we were able to find someone. Like, tell me what you know. And she ended up actually reaching out to Sean, who we now know is the gentleman in the overalls. And we ended up actually bringing in his helmet, which he hand painted. And I think, do I have enough time? Okay, I will quickly tell the story of this helmet. So freshman year, his roommates went to every home basketball game, and he wanted to try and add something more to the student section. So they ended up getting these hard hats from Home Depot, painted them, and used stickers from the bookstore as decals. And it slowly evolved with more people dressing up, painting their faces, making helmets, and bringing props to distract the opponents when shooting free throws. They did this until their senior year, which is the year that FGCU actually went on our Dunk City run, which is one of our highest like basketball runs of an academic or of a season. So not only are relationships like those really, really neat, but it also helps make our development officers really happy because we're bringing in physical and or monetary donations and bringing alumni back to connect to the archives in ways that I didn't know was possible. Some suggestions I have, since I know I'm running short on time. This is possible. Social media is an extension of archival practice. I promise it seems like a lot of work, but it's a lot of fun. And if you do have a social media, make sure that you're interacting with other accounts. It's easy to post and then just like leave it alone. But make sure that you're like actually liking and commenting and like responding to people. And then tag and collaborate with other people and assess and adapt and repeat. And then it's not a social media presentation without me telling you to follow at FGCU Archives on Instagram and Facebook. And then I will introduce who's next. Okay, come on up. Oh yeah.
Oh, that's not. Oh, it's not. I'm sorry. I actually don't see it now. Is it this one? It should be red. Are they combined?
Is it? Is it not that one? The typing into archive.
That one's like a pinkish. No. This is awkward. It's not combined. Yeah, it's not there. Okay. Do you want me to go next?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, we'll figure it out. Do you have?
Do you see the?
Do you see your
Yeah,
slides?
sorry.
Oh, do you see my? Yeah, okay. Do you have a flash drive? I could pull it up on Google Slides.
Oh, you can.
But I can go last.
Okay. Sorry, I'm trying to share the screen. How do I do that?
It's not much. No.
Oh, thank you. Okay.
Well, these aren't my slides though.
They're not.
No, this isn't much.
Okay.
I'll just do a little thing.
This is what weird.
I can show you. I can pull
Okay.
it up.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll do mine.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. I'm gonna do. Let's see if this works. Okay, let's minimize all that. I'm gonna do the extend the display. So we'll see how this works at friends at home.
Oh,
Yeah, that way I can. Yeah, that way I can see my notes.
Oh, no, no, no.
I don't know. How do we share?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh.
Let me see if I share and try and do like, or sorry, if I pull it up here. It's this one. And let me try doing the other. I'm gonna do presentation. Yeah, the slideshow.
Good.
Yeah, and then let's see.
Is this sharing?
Is it
I
sharing?
don't think it's sharing, so we'll need to go.
Oh, let's go to the next one.
WebEx. Yeah.
Sorry,
okay.
share. There we go.
Yep.
Perfect. Okay. Hopefully you guys can hear me virtually. I can't see you or hear you. So thank you all for being here. I know there were a lot of great choices this morning, so I really appreciate you being in this session. My slides advance. There we go. I'm going to talk a little bit about an internship that I did last summer for LGBTQ religious archives networks. I'm going to refer to them as LGBTQ RAN, just makes it easier. I'm going to share a little bit about my project details, as well as the process that I used. I'll show you one of the videos that I created for them, and then what I hope will be the next phase of this project. So LGBTQ RAN is a completely virtual archive. They have no physical repository, but what they do is they write profiles, they collect information on LGBTQ religious leaders and groups through these profiles that they do through oral histories and other events. They have two purposes, and the first is to help LGBTQ religious leaders and groups with preserving their history, as well as finding an appropriate repository. And the second thing is that they provide an online clearinghouse for all of their archival collections, as well as historical data about LGBTQ religious leaders and groups, so that historians, researchers, and other interested parties can learn more about who these people are. I worked with Doris Malcolmus. She's the archivist for them. She's a retired archivist from Penn State University Libraries, and she's the one that actually helps these religious leaders and groups preserve not only find the repository, but also helps them preserve their works or get started in an archival process. So a little bit about the project. So when I started last summer, Doris had a 17-page PDF that was on the website, and she knew that this was not working for her audience. And so she wanted to create this archival toolkit. And so she had this grand vision. There was nothing created yet, but the thing she knew she wanted to do when I applied for this, where she's like, we're going to make videos. I was like, okay. So the audience was, they're very busy people. They don't have a lot of technical skills, but they know they want to preserve their historical data. And they needed things that were quick, training that was easy to access and be on their way. And the timeline for my internship, just for so you all are aware, it was really 3 months. It was June through August, and 10 hours a week. I started a little bit early because Doris was pretty anxious to get things going. Because I have a design background and I come from libraries, but not so much archives, but I've spent most of my time doing instructional design. I really like design thinking. And so I've used this a lot to help kind of extract information from people and get to know a project a bit better. So some of you may be familiar with design thinking. It comes out of Stanford, the D School, an organization, IDEO, made it pretty popular. But this is sort of how things sort of ebb and flow. I kind of went through this kind of like, what are we inspired by? Let's brainstorm. We use things like how might we questions, but I also like their tools for ideation because I think it really helps to get to know an audience better. And if I'm thinking about this from a really traditional linear approach, this is sort of how the project was sort of structured. We spent a lot of time on the audience, and I wanted, because I was new to archives as well as new to her audience, and I knew Doris knew a lot about her audience, I wanted to spend a lot of time myself getting to know these people and what they actually needed. And so we spent a lot of time doing some of the review and revision on that. Which I'll go through before I even got to prototyping and designing any kind of like product. We review and revise that and then moved on to the final product. So one of the tools that I really like to use was called Designing for Influence. And it's just really sort of asking a bunch of different questions. You can do it in any kind of format. I used a table, but basically I'm trying to get to know who these people are and then what do we know? And by what we know, I meant what does Doris know about these? So she was really good about able to identify like who the audience was, but also the secondary audience that she would have liked to have reached out to, that she was looking to connect to. So I'm taking all of this information in as we go along so that as I'm thinking about how this project is going to work, I kind of have this understanding, this bigger understanding of how we reach different people and different groups. There's also, we were looking at what do these people care about? So like, you know, they really cared, they knew that they hadn't created the history, but that they were stewards of their history, and they were really caretakers and wanting to keep going forward with how to preserve it. But we also talked about our own goals for the project and things that we knew and things that we didn't know about that. So out of all this questioning, I said to Doris, I said, let's do a survey. And she's like, I don't really want to do a survey. And I said, I really want to do a survey. And so she's like, okay. So we didn't have a big group to pull from, but they had an advisory group. And so there were about 15 people. We got about 11 responses, which I feel is pretty good. We asked them 6 questions. 2 of them were, what's your name? What's your title? But the other thing I was curious about was just sort of hearing and confirming whether what Doris was saying about this audience was accurate, or if there was any other things that we could kind of like dig out and uncover. So one of the things I asked them was like, where are you now in the process? And Doris was right. The number one thing is the process is overwhelming to them, and that they lack the technical skills. And they also came up too that they lacked the time and the staff, so they didn't have the resources. So Doris was on the money with this one. And then I asked them, I was like, well, what do you think would be helpful in terms of getting started? And so a lot of them put a checklist. They wanted some kind of process, which I thought was funny because Doris had that in that 17-page PDF, but they just weren't able to get to it because they didn't have time. But then the next 2, the things that tied were the how-to videos and a simple overview of the process. And then one of the other questions I was curious about, how did you learn about the archival process? And this was more about thinking about how they got to Doris. And I wanted to think about strategies for outreach, beyond just people just sort of finding her haphazardly. And so this was, she was really actually surprised by this, that people found her through either a local librarian or historian, or they spoke with a colleague. And then finally, it was sort of like, what is your current need? And not surprising at all, preserving digital records is very challenging, but also just identifying what to save. So they really didn't know how, what they should keep and what they should throw out. And then I thought this was funny, was the free consultation, because most of them knew Doris and already had free consultations with her. So this is sort of the results in a nutshell. I highlighted those last two that inherited their history and stewards caretakers, because when we got done with the survey, I did another design thinking tool, and it really was sort of like the aha moment for Doris. And that design thinking tool is called empathy mapping. And you're really just asking, like, what do you want people to say when they've completed something? How do you want people to feel? And so I asked her, I'm like, what do you want these donors to say after completing a video? And she was like, wow, I want them to say, I can do this, like I'm not doing anything wrong. And then I asked her, how do you want them to feel? And she said, I want them to feel accomplished. I want them to feel that they are actually caretakers and part of preserving their history. So so that became sort of like our guiding questions through every video that we did. We kind of like use that, or like, are we on the right track? Are we doing the right things? Do you think people will think and say these things? So for those keeping score, this was sort of like where I was with the audience. I spent probably about a month and a half going through the surveys and, doing some of the brainstorming. And then July and August were spent mostly on prototyping, and then the final products, kind of back and forth in there. But just to give you an idea of like where we're still weaving in and out of that ideation, inspiration, but not really getting to the implementation until July and August. So the next thing I had that Doris and I really talked about was, one, how many videos we were going to do. She wanted to do 5. We actually got 4 accomplished, which I was very happy about. And also the naming of all of those videos and what order they were going to be in. And next came scripting. And everybody hates scripting. But I told her, I said, think about this as you're talking to a donor, what's really important, and try to be succinct. And she did a fantastic job, because she also put in what she wanted them to see. And so that made my job a lot easier. And I just kind of fancied it up, sort of, and made it kind of just in a table so that we can easily see what I'm saying and what matches with those images, whether it's video, whether it's text, and sort of like the timing as well. And I will tell you these 2 things. If you want your videos to have transcription and they're accessible with captions, scripting will make your life so much easier, because it's all there and done for you already. So next came really prototyping. And for this, what I used is a tool called Camtasia. And they have all these great little template things that you can do. So I created an intro, a standard outro. And once Doris had approved all of that, I just made a template, and I never had to touch it again for the next 4 videos. And with that, I will show you, we did get the 4 videos. These were, I think I had really pretty thumbnails that I created. They changed them to make them more findable through the algorithm. Okay, whatever. But I'm going to show you, I'm going to stop sharing. Well, hopefully, I'm going to show you one of the videos. So let me see if I can do this. Come back. Okay, there. Okay. And hopefully this is working. Oop. Oh, you can't hear it. Oh, yes, you can.
Before you communicate with the archives, you will need to identify the size and the contents of the collection. There's no need to sort your records before donating them. Plan to open and review the contents of each box and create a list that summarizes the kinds of records in each box. Assemble the equipment you will need. Markers, Post-it notes, strips of paper cut lengthwise, boxes to be used for transportation, and a few extra for sorting and any records destined for assembly. A table large enough to review box contents. Be sure to give each box a temporary number using a Post-it note. You do not need to look at or list every folder. Instead, generalize box contents such as board minutes, financial records, computer hard drive, newsletters and correspondence, and event flyers, letters, and buttons. You do not need to lead folders, but may discard large quantities of outdated newsletters and brochures before donation. Keep 2 to 3 copies of printed materials. Identifying flyers and photos is useful, but can be done after the collection is in the archive. While it is tempting to read every folder, remember that the archive will review all the materials you donate. Your box list will help you communicate with the archives and track your collection through transportation. Keep watching. Need more help? You can find our contact information and resources below. Be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel.
Okay, so that was the video, one of the, oh, and it's still going. Okay, there we go. Let's see if I can get back to my slides. Yay, okay, thank you. So hopefully the opportunities that I'm hopeful about were that, one, that this is obviously part of a larger resource base. They've actually started creating the web page and they have things kind of chunked out, so it makes more sense where the videos are and the order that they fall in. I'm hoping that she'll do more videos over time. I know I'm going to be doing another one for her this summer, but also that target specific needs of some of the audiences that she wanted to connect with. They just had hired a communications coordinator when I started last summer, so hopefully they can pull some of those clips out for social media use, as well as we used in some of the videos. I used Doris had gone to visit other archives and using that archival video within this video to kind of showcase different archives. And then one of my hopes is that once this sort of gets packaged a little bit into the toolkit, we can come back and actually look at and do a little bit of research to see if our guiding questions were actually worked. Did the donors feel that way? Were they able to think and feel? Did they think and feel the way we hope they do based on the videos that we created? So thank you. I appreciate you being here. I am happy to share out these slides at some point if you want to grab the resources and check out LGBTQ Religious Archives Network as well. Okay. Thank you.
One second, folks, sorry. So you all don't see my password. All right, can the online folks see the screen?
No.
No? All right. Can they see it now?
I'm a mind reader. I asked them all. They said no.
All right. Real quick,
Yes.
don't feel like you need to rush. We're gonna push everything back 10 minutes because I have to reset all of the technology. So.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you for your patience. We always get there in the end, no matter how long it takes. Let me see if I can move this because I'm sure that's not going to be fun. Okay, so as you've already heard, but you probably don't remember at this point, my name is Laura Lethers. I am currently the digital project librarian at NC State for what we call the 3X project. Today, I'll be presenting on promoting online engagement with archival materials in a digital world based on how we move materials for the 3X grant through our digitization workflows at NC State. So let's see if our clicker is working. No, let's try this. Okay, so first things first, NC State University Libraries did receive grant funding for the Expanded Extending Cooperative Extension History Project. This grant is made possible by funding from the Federal Institute of Museum and Library Services. This is a Library Services and Technology Act grant administered by the State Library of North Carolina. This grant began in July of 2024 and will conclude later this year. I'm not going to linger on this, but if anyone has any questions, you're welcome to ask me later. So an introduction to the 3X project. The official title of the grant is Expanded Extending Cooperative Extension History, which can become a little bit of a tongue twister. So we have shortened it and called it 3X. The purpose of this grant is to digitize primary source materials related to North Carolina agricultural extension. NC State and NCA&T State University work in tandem with all levels of government to work on agricultural extension. Special Collections has done other grants related to extension materials in the past, one in partnership with NCA&T. The products of those previous projects can be found on our rare and unique digital collections website. The goals and outcomes for 3X are to digitize many different types of extension materials. We've got historical reports, pamphlets, some publications, and a lot of photographs in different formats. Our chronological period for the project is approximately the 1910s to the 1980s, and we are doing this project in partnership with the State Archives of North Carolina. So I did want to give a shout out to their digital access branch, particularly Michelle Witt, who is currently giving her own presentation downstairs, and Colin Reeve, who recently retired, for all of their hard work and assistance on this project because we could not do it without them. So I also wanted to show just a couple of the materials that we have digitized so far on the project. On the left side of the screen, you will see some materials courtesy of the State Archives of North Carolina that are from their collections. And then on the right side of the screen, you'll see some NC State materials. The materials selected to be digitized under this grant were chosen to focus mainly on activities within North Carolina's 100 counties. We wanted to get a more grassroots view of extension with a focus on the activities of women and children in rural North Carolina. So think 4-H and home demonstration activities, as well as more African-American extension in our digital collections. So now that we have a basic understanding of what the 3X project is, we'll move into kind of an explanation of the SCRC digitization tools that we use that allow us to increase our digitization output on projects like 3X and thereby increase the variety of material online for the public to engage with. So the Special Collections Research Center at NC State Libraries is fortunate enough to have access to what I will call an above average amount of technical support. SCRC has a long history of collaborating with another department within the libraries called Digital Library Initiatives. DLI focuses particularly on web application development, and development for the current suite of tools that SCRC uses dates back to around 2011. The tools that DLI develops with SCRC are integrated both with each other as well as being compatible with third-party systems such as ArchiveSpace. And the development for these tools is iterative with improvements happening in varying amounts as time allows, and other departments such as IT obviously get involved as they need to. So each of the tools used daily currently within special collections required valuable time, effort, and resources to create on the part of many individuals across both departments. A few of my colleagues have authored an in-depth paper for the 2024 iPres conference that goes into more detail about the entire ecosystem of tools that we use at SCRC. And I wanted to note that on the bottom of the slide because it was very helpful for me to refer to in thinking about our workflows. But for today, we'll just be looking at two of the most important tools for our digitization workflows. So the first homegrown tool that we use is affectionately called Wanda. Wanda is what is called an orchestration system aligned to SCRC's specific needs for digitization. It includes a number of other tools within it that automate the creation and publication of our access files. So when a student technician goes to scan a folder for the 3X project, they first create a project in Wanda. In the screenshot on the left of the screen, the first project is highlighted in teal. Within a project, you can then create multiple resources, which each present as one item on our digital collections platform. So one item could be one photograph, or it could be an entire folder of photographs that has been digitized. So with the creation of a resource, Wanda then creates the unique ID for the file names. On the left, you'll see the short list of projects in the listing, but on the right, you'll see a screenshot of a project with a resource already created. So an individual project in the screenshot on the right has a lot of different connections to other applications. So it includes a link to the Archival object in archive space, as shown there. Connection to our network storage, where the image files are exported once they are scanned, as shown there. It also has a link to another application that I will be talking about later, which is our metadata application SCAMs. And then it also has a link to the EXIF tool report for the files in network storage, which helps us do our technical QC. So what Wanda essentially does is it takes the user step by step through our digitization workflow with buttons that must be clicked to move on to the next step. And certain conditions have to be met before you can move on to the next step, along with the instructions. So in the screenshot on the right, we are about to begin QC, which is a stage in the process. And then you can also see the instructions for QC written above it. So there is flexibility within certain steps, but many of the steps, especially for quality control, trigger certain processes within Wanda. So when I, as a project manager, finish QC on something, I publish the project with another click of the button, which then lets Wanda know the access derivatives need to be created and then published online. So once an item has been published, we then do another round of QC where the published item is reviewed with another click of a button. It also sends the files to preservation. So Wanda essentially streamlines the production process from scanning to quality control, the creation of access derivatives, publication, and even sending the files to preservation storage. So for anyone who has ever done any sort of digitization or worked in digital collections, I do not have to tell you how useful something like Wanda is and how helpful it is in our day-to-day. My supervisor is very fond of saying that Wanda is wonderful, and I can't really add to that because it just is. So our next homegrown tool that works in conjunction with Wanda is called SCAMS. It stands for Special Collections Asset Management System. And as the name suggests, SCAMS is a metadata and asset management system. For each resource in Wanda, there's a corresponding SCAMS record, which houses the metadata that is then published on our digital collections site. So student technicians can navigate from Wanda to SCAMS to input metadata as they digitize. On the left, you'll see one of our 3X records in SCAMS with some of its relevant metadata. And on the right is a search listing for 3X within SCAMS. And you can limit your search based on all of the facets listed on the left, which are also metadata facets that SCAMS allows for. So by using Wanda and SCAMS together, we have a streamlined digitization workflow that enables us to place more materials online and relatively quickly. Those materials can then be used by our staff in instruction, our users for research, or for outreach activities. So traveling tools. For the 3X project, we are, of course, digitizing things at NC State, but we are also digitizing materials on site at the State Archives in downtown Raleigh. So this raised a few considerations for how we were going to use our homegrown tools in a slightly new context. So there were a handful of things to take into account when we needed to start scanning with the State Archives. We needed to know how we were going to align our metadata specifications. What equipment would we be using? How did it differ from what we were used to? What would our computer access look like? With Wanda and SCAMS both being web applications that can only be used through NC State's network, we needed to know what internet and VPN access would look like. Every decision that was made relating to all of these questions also needed to be answered through the lens of final public engagement with the materials. What would be optimal for how the digital surrogates would eventually be published online? And how could we adjust our usual workflows to make that happen? So we worked out what our metadata specifications needed to be, if we needed to make any changes to adhere to both institutions' standards. Thankfully, it turned out that we did not need to make that many adjustments. We also took the time to familiarize ourselves with the scanning equipment at the state archives, learning which materials suited which scanner. We got computer access established, ensured we could use both Wanda and SCAMs. Thankfully, it turned out to be pretty easily. I think being both state institutions, we use the same VPN, so we just had to sign into the NCSU VPN. Which was nice because no downloads were necessary, because working through state archives IT might have been a completely different story in time and resources. Things obviously do not always go smoothly, as tends to happen where technology is involved. There have been some challenges that we've had to overcome. Some days the VPN simply won't cooperate for whatever reason. Other days the scanners decide to be moody. And sometimes there's back and forth with equipment because one of the scanners is not on the network. So we had to come up with a slightly adjusted workflow for not being able to enter metadata and create Wanda projects at the same time that materials are being digitized. So what we decided to do was the student technician creates the Wanda project, has the ID and the file name for the item, which then becomes the name on the folder in the hard drive. Then the hard drive walks down the hall and is connected to the non-networked computer where things are scanned, and then metadata is entered at a later time. So needless to say, the students working on this project have become very adept at problem solving and have learned how to make things work within the necessary parameters, which is always a good skill to have. So to wrap all of this up, I did want to look at some of the opportunities and challenges of in-house tools to create digital surrogates. So some opportunities these in-house tools present include the customization that we are allowed at SCRC. The applications are designed and built according to SCRC's needs and then what DLI can achieve. If we want something to appear a certain way on the public side, we can generally make it happen within reason. So we can tailor our presentation somewhat to our online engagement. The responsiveness of DLI is also amazing. Any issues that arise are always addressed very promptly and are always impressive considering they have their own workload, they have their own projects that they're always balancing, but we do not have to contact a third party to get help with these web applications, which is very nice. We all know that if you have and of course maintain a good relationship with your IT, many doors will be open to you and your life will be much easier. So because these tools are built in-house, they are made to align closely with NC State's requirements for security. So we do not have to jump through any extra hoops to make use of a third-party system. And lastly, for opportunities, these tools are very efficient. They work well with one another because they've been specifically designed that way. Our goal for year one of 3X was to have 18,000 image files published online. Our students have been scanning since September. So in the last 9 months, we have published over 20,000 image files online. So we have already surpassed our year one goal. But for all these opportunities, there are of course some challenges, as there always are. Building these tools requires a lot of staff time. DLI as a department has many other responsibilities. SCRC might have other projects that need to take precedence while something is in development. Sustainability in the long term could also become an issue related to staffing turnover. Institutional knowledge could leave. But sustainability also takes a lot of time and effort. If a new version of an application is ever deemed necessary, it could take a few years to come to fruition. And lastly, if we ever did want to make significant changes to our current workflows, we would also have to change Wanda and SCAMs to adapt. The tools were built to align to our workflows, and while they are adaptable on a smaller scale, large-scale changes might require an entirely new version of the application. But the important point, without these tools and the time and effort that went into creating them, the 3X project would not have nearly the same level of output or be as adaptable to different contexts, such as the state archives. It's these tools and how we are able to use them that allow us to streamline our workflows and maximize efficiency. With them, we can increase the number of digital surrogates we publish online for the public to engage with, and the project can be more successful. So that's all I have. Thanks, y'all.
We can just stop cheering, but did anyone have any questions? I know we're kind of, well, it's 10:58, so we have time for questions, and I think the next thing starts until 11:30. So does anyone have questions for Laura, Amy, or Emily? Yeah.
You might have mentioned this, but how many students were scanning?
So throughout the lifetime of the project since September, we've had 4 different graduate student assistants. At any one time, there have been 3 maximum, and one of mine just left, so we're down to 2.
That's for Emily. As far as using X, have you seen any changes as far as knowing now that it used to be Twitter and it used to have much better following, and now it's being run by Elon Musk? Thoughts with that? So I didn't know if Twitter or X or anything, or have you guys ever thought of not using that, or using Blue Sky or doing other things, or do you guys still cling, or do you use Twitter at all or X?
I Mhm. I personally have thoughts on X that I will happily talk to you about. As for FGCU archives, we do not use X. We don't use Threads. We don't use anything other than Facebook and Instagram. And even that is still a choice every year that we go through, and we do the same thing with the social media strategy where we talk about what platforms would best suit our users. Thank you for your question.
Do you have any plans to make Wanda available to other libraries? And my follow-up question is, are there third-party open source systems that approximate what Wanda does?
So I'm going to answer the second question first. I personally have never come across any that approximate that level of adherence to a certain set of workflows simply because it was designed so specifically for SCRC. And I think that, don't quote me on this, but I think that's the reason that Wanda was built and a third-party system wasn't used, was because it needed to be so tailored. So I do not know of a third-party system that would be an approximate equivalent. As to the first question, I know that conversations are always had around these in-house applications as to what could be made available and be more open source. Sometimes it is able to happen within the libraries, but with applications more like these that are so tailored individually, it would be very difficult to package them to be more open source. So while it is not a hard no, and those conversations come up quite a bit, there's nothing in process right now for making that happen.
We also have social media. Find this that we suffer from burnout very quickly with it. I was wondering if maybe you could talk about strategies to make enthusiasm and therefore effort sustainable in for social media. And then also I wondered if a key to any sustainability is the balance you have between among the types of topics that you post. We've been focusing primarily on hunting out good stuff out of collections, which is extremely time consuming. So could you talk about kind of all that package of how to keep this momentum going using social media?
Yeah, I think so. The first part of your question was, how do we not suffer from burnout? Which, when you're doing social media and even just this field in general, is very, very common. I think that's why I'm so grateful to have an institution that's so young, and so my archives is made up of about 10 student workers and then 3 full-time people. And we all share responsibility for it. So it's not just on me. It's not just on the students. Like, I have a good team that collaboratively shares responsibility for it, which is not something you're always going to get. Especially I've spoken with many other institutions who have tried to do something similar. And a lot of the older librarians don't want to be on camera, which I totally understand, or even just students in general. I think it's just creating some sort of pathway of this is our responsibility. Let's get excited about this. I have an anthropology background, so I always like to frame it as like whatever I'm interested in, you might not be interested in, whatever you're interested in, I'm not, but like you're going to find your audience somewhere, which usually gets our students pretty excited. One, that they have responsibility to like be part of this secret thing, that they know that they're on the back end of our Instagram page. And then I tell them not to get too excited. I will delete anything. But also just like that they feel included and feel a part of it. Remind me what your second question was? Yeah. Time, yeah. I think so. I think part of our strategy is because there's so many people that already have ideas, or like they're waiting for their week, so they're already like kind of deciding it before they get to the day where they have to post. But again, I think I'm also just, I mean, I hate to say it, but I feel like I'm just in a lucky spot because our institution is so young and our archive is so young that like I don't have 3 rooms to go look through full of materials. But I think identifying like if you want a specific topic like of content, so if you want to target alumni for a certain week, like maybe creating some sort of hidden gem in the alumni collection, if that makes sense. Yeah.
We do have a couple of questions from the chat. The first one is for Laura. Has the experience with offsite archival work prompted any ideas for workflow changes?
Yes. So anytime we come across any sort of hiccup with anything dealing with Wanda and scams, there's always a sort of mini brainstorming session between me and our lead librarian for stewardship and discovery. I always get his title wrong. But we do go back and forth about how we can maybe make certain things easier. Like when we ran into our non-networked computer issue, we were trying to determine, okay, how are we going to get file names out of Wanda? How are we going to do this? How are we going to do that? So it does prompt conversations. Nothing has come of any of that yet, and they're never major workflow changes, because I think since 2019, when Wanda was released, most things have been battered around and kind of broken, fixed, and we've kind of determined a good flow. So I think we're kind of in stasis right now, but there's always room for improvement there.
And then we have one more question for Amy. Which religious groups are engaged, denominations, and faiths with LGBT?
That is a great question. There are a lot of different groups that are involved with them. Some of these groups had splintered off from like the Catholic Church and Protestant churches. And so they've kind of created their own groups. So it was like, I can think of the big one as Dignity USA is a big group. I think they split off from Methodist or maybe Lutheran. But there's all different kinds of spiritual group, not just faith-based in terms of like what we consider traditional mainstream religion, but also I think there's some Two Spirits, there's Indigenous, there's just other different religious groups. And really it was a way for people that were in the LGBTQ community to find their spiritual connections with other people.
Have you found, since your videos are on YouTube, have you found that other groups or other entities have been watching your videos or like interacting with them in any way?
Yeah, so when the project ended in August, they hadn't put the videos, hadn't made them like public yet. So I think now that the Archival Toolkit webpage is up, I'm really interested to get a little bit more data from that as well. So great question. And I haven't really just followed up with them yet, but I can ask and see. Yeah.
Well, thanks everyone. Things actually started at 11:15 or 11:25. You can go to where you need to go. Also, do the things that you need to do before you get there.
No worries. Thank you.
You know.